Welcome back to Risky Business, a show about making better decisions. I'm Maria Konnikova.
And I'm Nate Silver.
So, Nate, today on the show, we're talking about some important things that are going on in government right now. The name Jeffrey Epstein probably rings a bell to some of our listeners.
Jeffrey Epstein. I've never heard of it. I've never heard of the guy. I've got nothing to do with him, Maria. Whew, I think I exchanged emails with him once.
Um, and on that note, yes, I am actually taping this from an office location. So you might hear some more background noise than usual. But yeah, you and I are both back from Vegas, Nate.
Well, first of all, Maria, I want to congratulate you for winning a poker championship trophy. You won the $5,000 No Limit Hold'em event at the North American Poker Tour? Anyway, we were both out in Vegas. This is the last event of this NAPT series, but it's a tough event. $5,000 price point. I want to be super honest. I thought it was a fairly tough tournament. A lot of regs, a lot of Vegas local pros there. Not the softest fields I've ever played. I flew home scared. Maria played this $5,000 event, and she won the fucking event. Tell us a little bit about that, Maria.
Thank you so much, Nate. It was the 5,300 high roller, the final high roller of the series. And I had busted out of the 10K high roller, as had you. We were playing that together. And then decided that, you know what, let's do one last hurrah. I tried to convince you to play, and you said you couldn't.
I would have had to downgrade from a business class seat on Delta to coach on. I would have had to take a red eye on Spirit Airlines, Maria. There are some things that are negative expected value. But if I had known I would win the fucking tournament, then I would have happily flown Spirit Airlines. But Maria, this is amazing.
I was just about to make the joke, Nate, that I'm glad that you decided not to downgrade because I would have had to come in second. So I'm glad I got to win. So thank you for flying home in business class. It was, it's always an amazing experience to win a tournament, but there's something extra special about winning a high roller where the fields are tough. You know, it feels really good when you are able to hold your own and kind of prevail against opponents who, most of them are a lot better players than I am. I'm not afraid to say that. It feels good when you can actually make it happen. I started, it was a multi-day event, and I started the final day, day two, as the chip leader, which is always a great position to be in. But that does not always, that usually does not translate, right, to a victory.
It's almost harder. It's almost harder, right? You have to remind yourself that I'm chip leader at the end of day one, fifth in chips out of 1,000 people.
Yeah.
Your odds of winning are not that much higher than they were at the start. Your odds of cashing often are even, depends, right? Even your odds of cashing can be below 50-50, right? So you have to not rest on your laurels.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Not resting on your laurels and being able to keep everything going is a really really tough thing to do. And it was one of those days where everything went right. All of my bluffs got through. When I went all in with Jack high, I got the fold. I didn't get the call. And I got the calls in the big spots where I actually had really good hands. That's what needs to happen, right? You need to make some hands and get calls, and you need to be able to, play when you don't have the best hands. And I also made some really good call downs. There were a few pots that gave me a lot of chips where really good players bluffed into me, and I was able to call down with hands that made me close my eyes and call instead of slam dunk calling. I was calling with third pair. Or
was this based on? Are there any particular players you want to mention? Is this based on GTO? Is it based on live reads? Is it based on your expectation of how people play against you? Do you think they think you're overfolding?
So I think that it's a combination of all of these things. There was one player who I haven't played with before, and he'd been running well the whole series. He'd had some good results, and I felt like he was, trying to take advantage of that a little bit. And so this was actually one of the hands that made me into the chip leader on day two. He triple barrel bluffed into me, where I ended up having a straight, but I had a straight on a double paired board. So for people who don't play poker, it's not a very strong hand in that particular case, because if if you're holding any one of the other cards, you have a full house, and he was the button, and the two cards that were paired were a queen and a 10. So those were both very likely cards for the button to have and for the button to represent. And in that particular case, there was just some spidey sense that just made me hit the call button. And I actually have no idea what he had because he mucked his hand, which is something that I actually never advocate players do. So if you muck your hand, that means I don't have to show my hand, right? So that means that he doesn't get the information with what I was calling him with. And had he known that I called him with the hand I had, that would have been, I think, very valuable information. So in that particular case, it was a combination of just the way that the hand played out. And like I said, the fact that he had been very aggressive all day. Then there were a few hands against Joey Weissman. I love Joey. We're friends. He's an amazing player. We've played a lot together. And he tried to bluff me in a spot where he had the blocker to the nut flush. And I ended up calling without a flush, but with a good hand. And it was one of those things where he understands GTO play so well. And the way that I played my hand, it was pretty clear that I did not have a flush. And so I thought that any good player would probably try to exploit that. And he did. I had bet the flop, and then I checked turn, and he bet big, and then he overbet the river. And I ended up using a time bank, because in these events, you do have a limited amount of time to make your decision. So I ended up using a time bank. And then I did make the call and saw that he had just ace high. But he had the right ace, right? He had the ace that you wanted to represent the flush. So it was a good bluff. I almost folded. But I'm very glad that I ended up making the hero call. And that was one of the big hands of that final day that made me really keep my chip lead, and it made Joey short, which is good because Joey's a very good player and he was to my left, and it was very good to have him bust out of the tournament. It's always nice when players who are better than you bust out.
I have a final table too. I final tabled the $550 OE Stud 8 mixed event. I
Congratulations.
Literally won $1,000 gross.
That's
$450 net.
Hey, you should be proud. You should be proud. I would have been nowhere near
from
that.
Frontier to Delta. Tell you that much.
Nice. On that note, Nate, let's shift gears a little and talk about some political news. So we're recording this, as always, on a Monday, November 17th. By the time you're hearing this, there will be more updates in this, but there have been things going on in the Trump White House, including major shifts on the dun Epstein files. I feel like we need the X-Files theme or something playing in the background.
Do you know there's a Harvey Weinstein running for city council in my district? That seems like an unfortunate.
That's amazing. That's amazing. What an unfortunate name. Can you imagine running for office with the name Harvey Weinstein right now?
Pretty bad. Yeah.
Yeah.
Adolf. Let's not go there. Anyway, I don't mean to compare. Anyway, friend of the pod, now the now deceased Jeffrey Epstein. No, I'm just kidding. Where do you want to start with this?
Someone's gonna clip that out of context, Nate. Someone's gonna clip that out of context. For people who've been hiding under a rock and have never listened to our podcast before either, the Epstein files have been a point of contention for quite some time. It was part of the things that the Republicans and Donald Trump ran on, release the Epstein files, tell us what was going on with Jeffrey Epstein. We want to protect our children. Once Trump got into office, all of a sudden there was, don't release the Epstein files. There's nothing to see here. Pam Bondi said, nothing to see here. Let's move on. But the popular clamor for the files never died down. It kept growing, kept gaining momentum. Cue an attempt of the Democrats to actually get the files released by circumventing the normal way for a measure to kind of come in front of the
I can
to come in front of Congress. Yeah,
technical background, right?
Right.
So usually the party that controls Congress has control of what is litigated or debated in Congress. In the House, there is a mechanism known as a discharge petition, whereas if an outright majority of all members of the House, which in this case, or not in this case, with 435 members, the magic number is 218.
Yes.
So there had been 213 Democrats in the House. There were 4 Republicans, Thomas Massie, who's kind of this libertarian from Kentucky, Nancy Mace, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is now feuding with Trump, and who's the other, Lauren Boebert. So that plus all Democrats was 217. However, Democrats won a special election in Arizona. The Republican Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House, dragged his feet to avoid seating her for as long as possible until the shutdown was over. She finally got seated and sworn in. There were now 218 to force the vote. By the way, there are many other Republicans who are planning to vote for this bill, right? And so what Trump finally did was he said on Sunday night that, okay, go ahead, House Republicans, and vote for this Epstein file. It's a big hoax and a big distraction, but go ahead and vote for it, House Republicans. Now, hopefully our American listeners know, maybe some of you Europeans don't know, but we actually have multiple chambers of Congress in the U.S., so the bill has to pass the Senate. It also has to be signed by the president, or you need a veto-proof majority, 2/3, to override it, right? So I thought it was interesting that Trump, in his language, said House Republicans and not Republicans overall. So it may be a way for him to save face. He's going to lose his vote. Now you kind of can't tell. You're like, okay, yeah, throw your tomatoes at me. I'll take. Doesn't necessarily mean he wants the files released, but that's what's kind of forcing it. Is like finally, this Democrat was seated. This petition's been in place since September. In the meantime, I believe it's the House Oversight Committee has released some files related to Epstein. Trump is mentioned quite a bit in there. A lot of speculation. I mean, by the way, Maria, do you know that I fucking hate email? I hate typing out long emails.
I know you hate email, Nate, as evidenced by the impossibility of getting you to reply to one.
First of all,
you put your
I'm
money where
boring.
your mouth
I have
is.
no scandal. But like, if I did, I wouldn't fucking email this fucking crazy shit.
Yeah, no,
it's not
it's actually quite crazy to me how much is in email form and how many ridiculously smart people put things into email that you're like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, we've obviously, Trump has mentioned many times, Larry Summers, former president of Harvard University, current university professor, he has quite the correspondence with Epstein. You just see, you see all of these people and you're like, guys, this is email. This ain't even, you're emailing Gmail account to Gmail account. Like, I don't need to be a great hacker to be able to hack this. And Nate, how many huge leaks and data breaches have we had over the last decade? The Sony emails, all of these things. Haven't you seen enough to realize that everything you put in an email is going to be easy to see? Anyway, this is an aside, but the stuff in these emails, it really is truly mind-boggling. And obviously there are tens of thousands of them. We've only seen the tip of the iceberg. I'm only seeing what people are reporting. There's no way in hell I'm actually going to go through any of this myself. I'll just let other people do it and I'll see what they're reporting. But I want to go back just a second to what you were saying about Trump's specific language about, House, go ahead, I want you to release this, which is a huge about face, this U-turn that he pulled to try, I think, as you say, to save face, because it was very clear that this was going to happen no matter what. Now it looks like he's saying, oh, well, I have nothing to hide, right? Going on the offense, but we still need the Senate. Unclear if it's going to pass the Senate. And on Friday, he also issued a command to his favorite Pam Bondi to start investigating some of the Democrats that are in the emails, such as Clinton. Now, and Summers, what that means is that he actually has another lever through which he can suppress some of these files, even if the measure passes both the House and the Senate, because if they're part of an active investigation, you can say, oh, for the integrity of the investigation, we can't actually release them. So he has a few different points that he can play going forward where we might not, people might think, oh, slam dunk, like he's done, he's in a corner. Not so. Right? There are lots of strategic exits that are still left and lots of plays still remaining.
The flip side being you have subpoena power, you have Freedom of Information Act, you have leaks to the media, and you have a lot of members of Congress from various committees who have access to some of these things. And so, you can do also reporting by organizations. It's not what the federal government is doing. If that information is out there, there's a good chance it will be discovered eventually. You can link it to Silver Bulletin if you want. I
or
have
to
to
the
check
leak.
the liability insurance situation. Probably would get sued. It might be good for subscriptions at first.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
I have been sued by the president. Subscribe to Silver Bulletin. No, I would say that. It would be much more eloquent. Why would I make that baby voice? That would be a good that'd be a good reason to subscribe.
You need a different voice for that, Nate. I
am an impartial journalist. I've been sued by.
Yes, the BBC voice. That's perfect.
Okay. But there are ways for that information to get out, right? I mean, look.
Yeah. Absolutely.
The initial news in July that Trump had been named in the Epstein files didn't actually seem to move the needle all that much, right? There was a little bit of a tick down in the popularity. The tick down seemed to be more about the obstruction than anything, right? When Pam Bondi said, oh, well, we investigated it and it turns out nothing funny going on there. Let's not keep litigating this. Let's move on to the things that really matter to the American people. And nobody bought.
I'm sorry, your Pam Bondi voice is it wasn't
excellent. Really, it was a stylistic, I don't know.
Yes,
but,
absolutely.
But nobody bought that, right?
By the way, Pam Bondi is now obviously doing an about face because before she said absolutely nothing to investigate, and then on Friday she opened investigations. So clearly, one of the two Pam Bondis was lying.
To me, the question is: are we past not necessarily some type of inflection point, but is Trump in some sort of a lame duck downward spiral, which are not quite the same thing, right? By lame duck, I mean, so Trump technically is a lame duck, unless he figures out a way to run for a third term. I don't know if we should dignify that or not. The way he would probably do it is to say that, okay, well, I'm allowed to be vice president. This is a dubious interpretation of the Constitution, right? And then so you'll, nominate J.D. Vance, but I will step in and be president when J.D. Vance wins, kinds of thing. But putting that aside for now, he is a lame duck in the sense that he can't run for president again. But by lame duck, I really mean does he lack the political capital to have the agenda setting power, the juice to get things done. In addition to this Epstein stuff, there are now more Republicans ignoring him on redistricting. Indiana, where there are 2 Democrats, seems not to want to redistrict. I think some of these Republicans have been spooked by Democratic success in New Jersey, Virginia, and so forth. You can have districts that are R plus 10, meaning voted for Trump by 10 points. Those aren't necessarily safe in a blue wave year. And so they might be worried about that. They might thinking, okay, well, actually Democrats have shown in California that we can have this kind of mutually assured destruction where nobody wins, right? And so the game theory is interesting. If you look at the ratings for approval ratings for presidents in their second term, they're much less resilient. And there are cases like Bush in particular, where it was just a downward trend. Nixon also because of Watergate, where it deteriorated very fast. Truman surprised people by defeating Dewey, despite headlines in the 1948 election, was very unpopular in his second term, kind of a straight downward arrow. And so once you kind of, you don't necessarily have your party coming to your defense if you don't have to run for election again. In fact, you have Republicans maybe positioning themselves for what does life look like post Trump, right? We've written or talked a lot in the show about how Democrats are still a mess. It's certainly a very valuable nomination to have in 2028, right? Assuming there's not a constitutional crisis, then they have to nominate somebody else. And the jockeying for that starts now. It's definitely occurring among Democrats already. And so yeah, I think the base case is always that, Trump has a high floor, low ceiling, high floor, but you never know. There's enough history of second term presidents actually going into this downward spiral where first term presidents tend to have this U shape or swoosh Nike shape recovery.
Yeah, I'll be very curious to see how this plays out. And I think a lot of it is going to depend not on the Epstein files, but on economic indicators, right? On what is happening with the economy, what's happening with inflation. Basically, how is the American public feeling? And what's going to happen with SNAP benefits, with Trump asking everyone to reapply for SNAP benefits, with all of these different elements. This is a puzzle right now that is, Trump has a lot of different things that he has to manage correctly in order for there not to be a downward spiral. And we've talked before many, many times on the show how, nothing seems to matter, right? Like it seems like he can rebound from anything negative. This is the first time, Nate, that we're actually seeing since he became president in term number 2, this is the first time I think that we've seen cracks in, this monolithic Republican support for Trump in the House, right? And they are finally starting to kind of crack a little bit. At least that's what it looks like right now. It's certainly, it happened with the 218 signatures, right? You actually did have the breaking of ranks. So I would really, I'm very curious to see how this ends up playing out and what happens in the Senate, right? Is the Senate going to fracture as well after, in the wake of what happened in the House? Is Trump is the fact that he said, oh, fine, go ahead, vote for this thing, we have nothing to hide, is that actually going to propel this through the Senate as well? Is he going to backtrack yet again? How is this going to play out? And what does that mean for his ability to pass everything he wants to pass in the next 2 years, right? To actually have that monolithic support. Is he still going to have it moving forward or not? Obviously, a betting person would say he probably will because he's always managed to regain it. But I think that it's a question mark for me for the first time.
Yeah, look, I don't know that Trump has that much more of a legislative agenda, really, apart from appropriations bills, which, as always, Republicans will try to lower taxes for rich people and corporations and starve the welfare state a little bit. Yeah, look, so you have, it would be subject to a filibuster in Congress. It seems like a kind of a bad look to, if the House votes overwhelmingly for, I guess you're kind of hoping that if you go to Polymarket, which I consult for, then there's only a 40% chance implied that the Senate passes the bill by the end of the year. Now, we don't have that many weeks left, and things in the Senate are slow, right? So they might kind of slow walk it and hope that people forget about it. I mean, the fact is that there are entire, like MSNBC has now been rebranded to MS Now, which sounds like a multiple sclerosis charity.
It does. It really does. It really
it's not.
does.
It's a cable
It's
news
such an
channel.
awful. What is it? Sorry, this is neither here nor there. But what is it with all these horrific media rebrands? I mean,
Well, it's so because like MS, like the partnership with Microsoft Network ended what, like 15 years ago or something,
Yeah.
right? This is the the news streaming. MSNBC is teaming with NBC News. It's like it doesn't really make sense, right? But like it made sense in the early aughts, I guess.
Yep.
And the name has stuck. But like, basically they're just going to be talking Epstein on MS Now. It's a new kind of Russia gate. So if you're hoping people forget about it, then they won't, right? But like, look, maybe Trump figures that like, what's the scene from A Christmas Story where the kid gets the BB gun? Like, don't shoot your eye out. Am I getting that right? I don't know if I've seen the whole movie. I know that scene. I'm sure I've seen the movie.
Oh my God, I don't remember, Nate. I don't remember.
But the kid gets a BB gun, and of course he like shoots his eye. I don't know what the fuck's going on. But it's a little bit like, you have Democrats with this BB gun on Epstein, and like they're so giddy about the story. Which, by the way, I say open up fucking everything, right? I don't like these political elites. I think they're fucking weird. Social circles and parties are fucking weird, right? Like, I hope as many people as possible are tainted for this and we get a better fucking set of elites, to be perfectly honest, right?
Yeah.
By the way, I think that it's not irrational for someone to ask whether Jeffrey Epstein really killed himself, right? I don't care. I think that should be, I think it's a normal thing to ask. If you go and like look at like what the fuck is going on with this, right? How is he doing all this stuff? And, I think there are lots and lots of open questions. I would love to see every single file on this released to the public and debated, right? At the same time, when you have kind of the MS Now partisan Democrats, right? There's a risk that instead of having this kind of moment of partisan crossover, then it goes back to kind of a he said, she said. People, I think, already have kind of low expectations for Trump. And so I don't know, right? But it would be an absolute like Epstein-a-palooza for 3 months if the files came out. Which again, if I were Democrats, I'd say, okay, this is a pretty good story for us, but there is an opportunity cost, right? And the opportunity cost might be to drive home a message about the economy.
Yeah. That's actually what I was just about to say. Like, in the grand scheme of things, like right now, you've got the economy, right? You've got inflation, you've got SNAP benefits being cut off, you've got the healthcare stuff, you've got all this stuff going on. It seems like a good moment to release however tens of thousands of emails and whatever else. How many pages are in the Epstein files, Nate? I don't think we know, but all of this just insane amount of information, and try to kind of bury it all, right? Trump is really, really good at the politics of distraction, right? He is very good at getting people to pay attention to things that make them not deal with the issues that are actually important at the moment. Like, he is so good at attention hijacking. And to be clear, with the Epstein files, he's been trying to avoid this, right? Because we already know that he's in the files. We already know that there's damaging information. The question is, how damaging is it? But I think he might be making a gamble now that, like, if they're going to come out, might as well, like, just have this barrage and try to bury everything else. And then, people will stop caring or stop paying attention to the things that they really should be paying attention to in terms of the welfare of the American people.
No, and look, there are sure to be other Democrats implicated.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? There are sure to be, I don't know, you can it's a little bit morbid. You can bet on like who's going to be named in the Epstein files and like
sure. Yeah, for sure. And I'm willing to bet that we are going to be seeing a lot of news headlines, and we're going to have a hijacking of the conversation about everything, every single Democrat, right, who's mentioned, however peripherally, in the files. So I think that will be another great opportunity for attention redeployment, shall we say,
No,
strategically.
and like to some extent, the notion that you have like a cabal, a bipartisan cabal of like rich elites who are behaving very, very badly and think that
Yep.
money can buy you anything you want, including access to underaged women, right?
Children. If they're
Children.
underage, Nate, they're children.
You know, in some sense, that kind of is part of what like sparks populist narratives, right? Now, if Trump is caught up in this, then he is hardly a populist savior, obviously. At the same time, like there's been people recently who, so Trump has pardoned a bunch of like January 6th rioters, protesters, whatever you want to call them, right? But people that were convicted of crimes. And I saw some article. It's like, well, people who criticized Joe Biden for pardoning Hunter Biden, you know, this is so much a bigger deal. And I'm like, no, fuck you, right? Because like Democrats are running on the we are the party of the rule of law and democracy and the moral high ground, right? And Trump is running on everyone's a fucking hypocrite. So do what you want. Yeah, maybe I like younger women. There's nothing wrong with the guy liking some younger women, right? Liking to go to a nice island. I don't drink, I don't smoke, right? I like to hang out. We talk about women, you know. I mean, like that's kind of, you know, Trump is reveling in his hypocrisy in a way, kind of his like degeneracy almost. So I guess he doesn't like smoke or drink or things like that, right? But he's kind of like a proud degen in a way, and that's different. They're not trying to like claim it's like, yeah, everyone's a hypocrite, so we got to look out for our own, right? And so when things happen that discredit, quote unquote, both sides of the establishment, that plays into cynicism of political institutions, and that plays into the hands of populists, including but not limited to Trump.
I'm just curious, kind of what is the line, right? Like where is the line? Like what? Because it seems to me that, you know, that Trump is able to withstand most accusations better than most people, right? So if we have the Epstein files released and there's bad stuff on Trump, but also bad stuff on, you know, a bunch of Democrats, he might be able to kind of waltz through it if there's, you know, nothing ridiculous, but they won't, right? So it's one of these things where it may be asymmetric risks.
No, I think yeah, and I don't know, you know, listeners, you'll be hearing whichever version of this the Pushkin lawyers have litigated because the president is right. But like, you know, look, I agree that like it's a little binary in terms of like, look, he's not been afraid. I mean, he talks about walking in the locker room at Miss America pageants, right? It's always kind of been like a running shtick or joke that, yeah, he likes women, right? Maybe he likes women that are a little bit younger, and that's kind of like priced in, right? So I think it would have to be like pretty definitive, pretty salacious evidence, which is possible. But I think it's like, yeah, to me, it's a little bifurcated between like either really bad or gets swept up, brushed aside into the previous narrative, right? And there probably is some middle ground.
Yeah, well, it'll be very interesting to see how this process moves forward, what happens in the Senate, and whether we do end up seeing a prolonged, you know, a sustained, I think is the word I'm looking for, sustained fracturing of the base, where Congress becomes a little bit less of a rubber stamp mechanism for the state. So, or whether this is a one-off and it will just go back to kind of to doing exactly what Trump says. And I think that the repercussions of that are actually potentially much wider because, as you've pointed out, Nate, and as we've talked about, a lot of Trump's agenda has been accomplished through executive order, right? Through kind of just saying, okay, this is what I'm going to be doing. And a lot of those are now making their way to the Supreme Court, right? In front of the Supreme Court, will be in front of the Supreme Court soon. And the Supreme Court has also shown itself to be very pro-Trump. But if there's a sustained fracturing of kind of the Republican support base in Congress, I'm wondering whether we might actually see the Supreme Court also become a little bit less rubber stampy and a little bit more willing to strike down things. I don't know.
For sure. The Supreme Court is sensitive to public opinion. Do you have closing thoughts here?
My closing thoughts are, I am, whatever's behind the pivot, I do hope that all of the Epstein files are released. And I do hope that, that they are released in a way that actually has a lasting effect and helps clean up the elites on both sides of the aisle. Let's be very clear. No one should be what was happening on Jeffrey Epstein's island and his mansion. All of these things are completely unacceptable, and people should be held to account. So I hope that we're actually able to see this, and I'm very curious to see what's going to happen in the Senate and whether the American public and Congress is able to maintain their focus and their attention on more than one thing at a time and keep the kind of eye on the prize when it comes to the health of the economy, the health of SNAP benefits, healthcare, all of these things. Like, let's multitask, people. We can do this. Two things at once. Don't lose focus.
What was the island called?
I don't know. Epstein Island.
I keep thinking of like the island in Jurassic Park, like Isla Nublar or whatever it is. Like,
yes.
Like, why not Jurassic Park 8 Epstein Island? Why not let the dinosaurs be the good guys for once, right?
Little St. James, Nate. Little St. James.
Child pedophile rapists. Like, that would be good, right? Wouldn't it?
Yeah, that'd be
great. It probably is going to be litigated by the Pushkin Supreme alleged child molesters.
Yes, but I'll watch that Jurassic Park.